Here we go. Yeah, here we go. Wait, take.
Throw. End zone. Caught. Terrence Williams. Touchdown, Cowboys. Tony Romo.
They go for the shotgun. Roger looks left. Fires it out there. Caught by Tony Hill. Touchdown, Cowboys.
15 to the 10, he'll score. Emmitt Smith dances to the end zone. The Cowboys have taken a 2-score lead.
Play fake to throw it out of the end zone.
Going way down the field for Michael Irvin, bumping and grinding at the 5. Oh, he's got it. Touchdown, Cowboys.
Over the middle, caught by Witten, who loses his helmet but still keeps going. A penalty. All the pressure on the left side. He drops the ball, throws, caught, Witten. Touchdown.
Big opening for Tony Dorsett. Look out, he's got great speed.
99 yards and a half.
Dorsett down the sideline. Stays in bounds.
Can you believe that?
And
Short because they
99 yards.
Prescott able to get out of the end zone and now airs it out for Lamb. He's got it. He's gone. When he gets there, it's a touchdown, Cowboys. On top.
You want to know what an all-pro looks like? Watch Michael Irvin here. He'll battle you all the way down the field.
Motion on first down, Aikman. Harper. Was that beautiful? Touchdown, Dallas. Men on the rush. Pass is caught. Deflection. Touchdown. Cowboys win. Amari Cooper.
Throws it down the field. It's caught at the 10. And this game is over. The Cowboys win it. C.D. Lamb.
But no. But you understand, we do have one game left to play. Hey, fantastic. Every single one of you. I mean, I'm not just talking about these last 60 minutes. I'm talking about the quarterback schools, the mini camp, the off-season, the training camp, down in Austin when it was hot and you were tired, the whole bit. Everybody, you did one hell of a job. And the only thing else I got to say is, how about them Cowboys?
Cowboys Nation, welcome back to another episode of Sons of the Star. Hope y'all had a great Thanksgiving week. The Cowboys certainly did, over a 27-20 win over the New York Giants. I'm your host, Dallas. Joining me again, as always, is Cowboy Reg. We are live on X tonight. If you have anything to put in the chat, make sure to throw it in there. And we got a special guest tonight, too. We're about to bring him in a minute. Larry Schechter. He's wrote a few books on fantasy sports, so we're going to talk about some fantasy sports today. But first of all, Cowboy Reg, how are we doing tonight?
Doing good. Yeah, I mean, got through the holiday weekend, and I'm a little stuffed, but I'm ready to get back to normal for a few weeks here. And I'm excited to talk to Larry tonight about the history of fantasy sports. This is going to be very educational for me. I can't wait.
Yeah, we know how bad your fantasy football team is, so he can definitely teach you a few things.
Yeah, I need some help.
I
need to get that. I'm sure he might tell us how to get that old pencil and paper back out, figure out the stuff, because these projections I'm using just aren't working for me.
Yeah, so we got the inside scoop for y'all tonight, so please make sure to throw some questions in there for us and Larry. But without further ado, we're going to bring Larry in right now. Hey, Larry, how's it going? Can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
All right, Larry, welcome.
I like that introduction. I think I'm going to tune in every week just to hear that 5 minutes of Cowboys highlights.
Isn't that great?
Hey, yeah, that's what we do. Yeah. Hopefully, we don't run into any copyright issues, but those aren't our voices saying that. But hey, we haven't been caught so far.
Someday we want to add to that, but that hasn't happened this year. I don't think we're adding any highlights.
Yeah, we can only talk about things from 50 years ago. So, hey, folks, this is Larry Schechter. He is the author of a new book, The History of Fantasy Sports, and that's not the only book you've written, correct? So, please give us the intro yourself and tell us about your new book.
Well, it's, as you said, The History of Fantasy Sports. The subtitle is "And the Stories of the People Who Made It Happen." Because what happened is I started this a little over 2 years ago, and I thought it was something I could knock out in a few months. I was crazy wrong. It took 18 months of full-time work. lots of research. I interviewed dozens and dozens of people, and of course, had to write the whole thing. And my idea was, nobody has ever written a book like this. I've wondered, how did we get from ideas people had years ago to where we are now, where you have millions and millions and millions of people playing everything from fantasy football and fantasy baseball to fantasy wakeboarding, fantasy cricket, fantasy Iditarod. It's all over the world. And you've got news services and stat services and podcasts, just everything. You turn on, a game and you got fantasy statistics. So I wonder, how did all this happen? Nobody has ever explained how this happened or written a book about the history. So that was my idea, write a book, The History of Fantasy Sports. As I started researching and talking to people, I started hearing information that was fascinating about what people had done. There were lots of stories that were just fascinating. Some were inspirational. A few bring tears to your eye. Lots of funny stuff. And so I realized early on that I could just write the history of fantasy sports and tell who did what when, and that would get the job done. It would also come off like a very boring research paper. But instead, by incorporating the stories of the people that I was hearing, and adding, making the subtitle, The Story of the People Made It Happen, it would tell the story of the history and at the same time be very interesting. And that's what happened. The book turned out, better than I could have ever imagined. The reviews are fantastic. People say it's easy to read. It's fascinating. People who've been in the industry their whole life or played fantasy sports the last 30 years didn't even know most of this information. I've played fantasy sports for 30 years. I didn't know most of it myself.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, you just took something that you liked and interested in and wanted to find out more and wrote a whole book about it. I mean, that's inspiring in itself. So that's really cool. Yeah, I guess I never really thought about most of the history of fantasy sports because for me, it's just always growing up, it was a thing. So I remember the first time I was old enough to kind of learn how to play, my dad right there, he invited me to his league and I started playing fantasy sports. It was probably when I was 10, 11, 12, maybe. But, do you mind getting into like where this whole thing started? How long ago were fantasy sports around? And just kind of go from there.
Well, the first chapter of my book talks about the precursors to fantasy. And you can go back to like the 1800s. They had tabletop games where you would you'd slide a penny with your finger and it would go into like a spring activated bat and hit the penny onto this board, and it might fall into a hole that said out or single or double or home run for baseball. And then you get games like there was Cataco All-Star Baseball, Cataco Ellis All-Star Baseball. Then you get games like APA and Stratomatic that were based on real player performances, but for prior seasons. So for me, the distinction of what I call, modern fantasy sports, the distinction is they're games people play with real professional athletes, but they're based on what hasn't happened yet. So you draft a fantasy football team in August, and then the season starts, and you see what happens. So you don't know what the players are going to do. The book goes, the second chapter is like the invention and spread of fantasy baseball, then the invention and spread of fantasy football, then the first commercial games, news services, stat services, radio shows, first publications, Fantasy Sports Trade Association. It covers everything through more, recently daily fantasy sports, worldwide expansion. And to, go back to your question, the first fantasy football league was in 1963, and it started by a guy named Bill Winkenbach. Now the thing is, Winkenbach actually had like a little kind of like a primitive game for baseball and for baseball and golf in like the mid to late 50s, and he told a couple of people about this the baseball and golf games. They said, well, why don't we do this for football? So they decided to do one for football. In 1963 was the first year that they started. One of the original players in that league is Ron Wolf, who later became the GM, the Hall of Fame GM for the Packers. Another guy in that original league was named Andy Musolimus. And the original league, they kind of kept it to themselves for the most part. Andy Musolimus owned a bar in Oakland, and he decided, I forget off the top of my head, it was a year or two later, he decided it'd be fun and good for business to make fantasy football available to his patrons. And so there were guys interested. They started a football league at his bar. And the next year they added a second league and then a third league and then a women's only league because the women wanted to play. And the men back then did not want women in the league. And the whole thing kind of spread from there. People would come into the bar and just say, like, what are these people doing? And it would spread word of mouth. And before you know it, there are bars calling from all over the country asking Andy Musolimus, can you tell us, how this game works and the rules of it? So he's the one who really started to spread it. And one of the things that's really interesting about him, when I would research things, I would like Google article after article after article, plus interviewing people. And like on Musolimus, for example, I read probably 20 articles to the point where I'm reading the same information over and over again, except every once in a while there'd be like this little tidbit I hadn't seen before. And Musolimus, by like about the 20th article, I see something that hadn't been mentioned before. The guy was a war hero. When he was 17, Pearl Harbor happened. He volunteered for a unit that was going to go behind enemy lines. The recruiter said 97% of you are not going to return alive. They gave him a cyanide pill so he could kill himself if he got caught. And, so it was like spreading fantasy football was like not the most important thing he did in his life.
Wow. That's pretty
awesome.
incredible. So that just gets into some of the background of who actually founded that thing, and something that, like you said, has become so big in not only the football and sports culture, but just American culture in general. I mean, everyone that's a football fan plays fantasy sports. Like it's crazy. I only usually play fantasy football. I've played fantasy baseball before. It's fun, but I find it pretty time consuming. I remember the one year I played, I just didn't. You got to set your lineup so often, like a daily thing. But definitely in the future, I'd like to get back into it. But you got to also be, a big football fan as well, right, Larry?
Oh yeah, I'm a big football fan, baseball fan.
So what would you say from an outsider's perspective, like what is wrong with the Dallas Cowboys right now? The organization, the team, the floor is yours. This is a Dallas Cowboy podcast. So we got to hear it.
Okay.
Well, don't sugarcoat it, Larry. We could take it.
I'll tell you what, I don't have a good answer for that question. I'm a big football fan, but I can't really give you a very intelligent answer about the Cowboys this year, except they're not doing good. But what I can tell you, I'll relate the Cowboys in my book, though, because when I was listening to your introduction with all the Cowboys highlights, it made me think of something. It's a story that I really liked it, but it wasn't quite good enough or relevant enough to go in my book because I got so many good stories. It's about Terry Bradshaw, and who lives in Dallas. And one of the guys in my book is named Patrick Hughes, who started something. He had a football game back in I think it was the 80s. Maybe it was the 90s. I don't remember. It's all in the book. But anyway, he had this thing called Miller Lite football and baseball, which was very popular and really helped spread fantasy sports. And he got Terry Bradshaw later to be the sponsor for his football game. And he had and this is in the book, but what didn't make it in the book, they had a meeting where Patrick Hughes and some guys came to Terry Bradshaw's ranch in Dallas or outside of Dallas, and for an interview, and they had lunch and they did an interview. And what happened is when they were pulling in, the truck carrying all the equipment got a flat tire. So while Patrick Hughes is having lunch with Terry Bradshaw and doing the interview, there's a guy in the truck trying to change this flat tire in the truck. And he was not able to successfully change the tire. So after lunch in the interview, the guys come out and they see this guy has been trying to change this flat tire unsuccessfully. So Terry Bradshaw goes into his garage, comes out with a big hydraulic jack, jacks it up, changes the tire, gets himself all muddy and dirty, and changes the tire for him.
Wow.
I love that story.
Terry's
it wasn't quite relevant enough to get into the book, but the book has got so many good stories. It's like choosing an all-star team. There's not room enough for everybody.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you get into the history and all that, and I can't wait to read the book. I'm definitely gonna order it and give it a read. It sounds like a really good read. But where would you say like the future of fantasy sports is going? Do you have a good idea of what it'll look like in 20, 30 years? Because I mean, it's just evolved so much, and now you have all these different types. But like, what is the big next thing you would think in fantasy football?
I have no idea. So this is pretty much I think this is pretty much the last line of the book in the epilogue is like, where's it going in 10, 20 years? I have no idea. I'll be glad to find out, but I'm not going to hazard a guess. It's like people keep coming up with new stuff. The book, the book is about the entrepreneurs who created this industry. So, the common thread is people would see a need for something and they would fill it, or they would see something that they thought they could do better. Like for example, Ian Allen, who runs Fantasy Football Index magazine, which is like one of the biggest football magazines for years. He started that with Bruce Taylor when they were in college, and they had played fantasy football for a year, and they thought, well, this is fantastic, but like there's no information anywhere. Let's start a magazine. And other people, same thing. They saw there's a need for something that doesn't exist, and this whole industry came up because of it.
Yeah, I feel like the future. I'm gonna like get out of this. Might sound crazy, but I feel like the future of watching football is going to be like every player's got their own little camera on their uniform somewhere, and you can watch from like the player's perspective. Then eventually you're going to be able to watch your entire fantasy team like play by play from their perspective. Maybe that sounds insane.
No,
I'd love to invent that.
Well,
I don't have the capability to do that, but something like that is where my mind goes.
Yeah, well, that would be an interesting thing just for football fans in general too. Not having anything to do with fantasy. If you just see all the plays from their perspective. Plus, in fantasy we don't have centers and tackles and defensive linemen, so you could their perspective would be pretty good too. Just
I guess you could get pretty crazy with the leagues. Go ahead, Reg.
I had one question for Larry. And you just kind of walked right into it there for me. Do you think that there's a stat line or stat lines that make sense that we can get linemen involved, where we do draft, 2 guards and 2 tackles and a center, with PFF and the way they're going with the rankings and everything? Do you see something like that coming down, or has it ever been tried and it failed?
It hasn't been tried that I'm aware of, and it's not something I've really considered. The main thing for fantasy is you need to have statistics that you can use for. That's why, Peter Schenker of RotoWire said, if it has statistics, you can make it into a fantasy game. So, for offensive linemen, I don't know, you can have like how many penalties were called on them, how many missed blocks did they have, but I don't know, like if you probably have to wait, like several days later to have, PFF tell you how many missed tackles, missed blocks they had. So I don't see that as being a very interesting game off the top of my head.
So the big guys aren't going to get any love anytime soon.
No, but on the other hand, one of the things about fantasy is it makes people aware of all the players, or maybe not all the offensive linemen, but like, one of the big things in the history of fantasy sports was the players associations and the leagues being very resistant to fantasy. And it took a while for them to come around and realize fantasy is a good thing for them. And Clay Walker was the president of the NFL Players Association for several years. He's one of the dozens of people I interviewed for the book. And he said, he was one of the first people in the Players Associations or league to realize fantasy is a good thing for us. He realized, who knows every tight end in the NFL, the people who play fantasy. Who knows, the backup second baseman for the Pittsburgh Pirates, the people who play fantasy. Who's watching more games? People play fantasy. So it took a while for the leagues to come around and realize, like, hey, this is actually a good thing for us. And now you can see the leagues are sponsoring their own fantasy games.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah, that's awesome. definitely makes you more aware. And if your team isn't having a good year, like the Dallas Cowboys, you're still going to watch other games and still have some hope. Me, not so much. I'm actually made the playoffs in one league. My other league, the one I'm in with Cowboy Reg here, I'm horrible. So I'm pretty much out of the picture there, but it makes you more aware of everything that's going on. It makes you a more informed fan for sure. So that's awesome.
Yeah.
So Larry, before we let you go, we got a ton to get into today, talk about Dallas Cowboys. But first of all, thank you so much for joining us today. But where can we find in our listeners, where can they find your new book?
It's available on most booksellers' websites, paperback and ebook. Amazon. If you want to get more details, and read a bunch of reviews about it, Amazon has lots of reviews. It's called The History of Fantasy Sports. Anybody who plays fantasy sports will love the book. A lot of people have loved the book that don't even play fantasy sports. Like the Midwest Book Review says, fascinating from start to finish. And that was a guy who's never played fantasy sports in his life. Because it's more about the stories than, it's not like about fantasy football strategy or who to draft or that sort of thing.
That's awesome.
I like that.
So,
yeah, I like that.
It's a great gift.
So everyone,
either buy it or get it on your holiday gift wish list. You can buy it for your friends to play fantasy sports. It's like there's like like if you find like a good website for advice, like RotoWire, RotoWorld, or somebody you'll think gives really good advice. You don't want to tell your league mates. You want to keep that as your own personal secret. But this is something you can give your league mates.
Yeah.
Yeah. Enjoy and spread the love. Maybe get some more folks interested in fantasy sports because it's a cool hobby. And that's awesome. Well, Larry, thank you so much for joining us
Thanks,
today.
Larry.
And everyone, go check out the book, The History of Fantasy Sports, and we can't wait to read it. So we'll definitely read that, and we'll let you know what we think. So thank you again, Larry, and hopefully we'll see you again.
All right, thanks. I'll be thinking of you this weekend when I watch the Cowboys.
All right, yeah, please
we
do.
like her.
Good thoughts only. All right, Larry.
I love it.
Have a good one.
Okay.
Take care, buddy.
Bye.
All right, folks. Well, that was Larry Schechter, the author of The History of Fantasy Sports. So we're going to tweet out all the information after the show. So please check out his book. It's really nice of him to join the show today and talk some fantasy sports, and definitely in the off season too. I can't wait to talk about something we probably didn't do enough this off season, was talk about kind of some of the guys to draft and things like that. I know we did at one point, but maybe we'll make a point to do more of that in the future. So thanks to Larry. Let's get into this thing. The Cowboys have won their second straight game, their first home win of the year. Cowboy Reg, 27-20 victory over the New York Giants, the struggling New York Giants, but a win is a win. They improved to 5-7 on the year. They're not dead yet. I'll say that. What did you think about the game, Cowboy Reg?
I mean, kind of what we thought it was going to be. It wasn't as close as a score. That was, 14 seconds or whatever, 30, 40 seconds. I don't know when they scored at the end, but I mean, it was what we expected. It's starting to be very apparent that we have a backup quarterback. Number one, he's figured out a way to win again with the tools he has around him. But number two, you don't see anything that just blows you away. He doesn't make any throws or runs or anything that you just like, man, this guy could be a starter somewhere else. I'm not seeing it right now. I'm just seeing a guy that's able to maintain and win some games. And if Dak was coming back in 2 weeks, then I would be really excited about what's happening. But realistically, every win, like the one on Thanksgiving, let's enjoy, because we don't know how many more we're going to get, honestly. So I just enjoyed watching it. It was fun to get a win at home finally, and to say, hey, we got 2 wins in a row. So I enjoyed that, but I'm trying to keep my head straight on what this really means.
Yeah, it's tough because but they did kind of turn the season around, really, maybe not fully around, but 2 wins in 4 days. 2 wins in 4 days was huge. You're 3-7 heading into that game with Washington. You fire off 2 wins, 5-7 all of a sudden in a matter of a week. I'm just saying, Sports Podcast says, do you think y'all can make a playoff push? We could push, but I don't know how far we'll get with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, like Cowboy Red said, I mean, you got 5 games left, right? You got
They'd have to
and
win
you
4
still
of
got to
them.
play.
They'd have to win 4 of them and get help. They win all 5, they probably get in. You can't look at that schedule and say we're going to win all 5. So
Yeah, the tough
I'm going
part
to
is like
say no, it ain't going to happen.
right
But
now
I
you
mean, it could get interesting though, right? I mean, the next 2 games are winnable. If they're 7-7, we're not laughing at those questions anymore. But right now, I think we still got to laugh at that question because it's just not realistic.
yeah, and it's like, you know, like Cowboy Rich, I think they would have to win 10. They'd have to win all 5 games left. So you're expecting them with a backup quarterback and all those
Yeah,
injuries. Jennifer Bullard says it could happen. So, all right, Jennifer, I appreciate the
mathematically,
optimism. She's feeling good tonight
yeah,
about Dallas Cowboys. We
I
need
think
more
she,
fans like
yeah,
Jennifer.
I think she mentioned
But
last week she might be going to that Carolina game. I think she's going to rep, so she's hoping for that win streak continues.
yeah, so but basically you got the Commanders right now with in the last spot in the playoffs with 8 wins. So, you know, you would have to have them only win 2 more games, right? Because everyone
Yep,
else only has 6 wins. So theoretically, you think that that 7th place team is going to get at 10 wins. You would be in the conversation. So which would mean you'd beat the Commanders again, so you'd have the
right.
tiebreaker over them. So that would be it. I mean, the Commanders would have to go, you know, 10-7 or worse. The Cowboys would have to win out. And yeah, you're in the playoffs. So yeah, there's absolutely a chance.
There's
I'm
more.
just saying
Yeah,
sports
there's more
podcast says if
scenarios.
y'all play the Giants every game, yeah, we're so bad. Yeah, I'm sorry about the Giants. At least you get I can't believe they haven't fired Dable yet, though, right? I mean,
Yeah, they maybe they have a plan and the guy they want.
yeah.
I mean, there's some Belichick rumors with us. There's some Belichick rumors with them. A guy like that is not coming in mid-season. He wants his coaches in full control. So when I see a team that refuses to fire a coach like the Cowboys and the Giants right now, I see that team must have a plan, and the guy they want will not come in mid-season. So they're just rolling with what they got.
Yeah, I'm just saying podcast says fire Joe Schoen. So yeah. Is that y'all's GM, I believe?
I think
I'm
that's
not
our GM.
entirely sure who that. Okay. Well, we
Yeah,
feel you there. The only thing is we can't. So at least be optimistic that you can fire your GM. So there is hope there.
yeah.
But yeah, I mean, the Cow, like you said, Cowboy Reg. Yeah, he said that. Yeah, that's their GM. So we'll see about that in the future, which is interesting because he had a whole HBO show in the offseason about the New York Giants. So not sure what
The
happened
the
there.
jinx, man.
Oh
That's the
man,
jinx.
the jinx. It's the
You
real
don't
deal.
want
You
no
got
part of that.
The
Yeah.
Bears and the Giants. So that's tough. But yeah, I mean theoretically the Cowboys they're not entirely dead yet. I mean, like you said, if they win all 5 games, but they got a tough stretch of games coming up. Yes, they play 2 teams that have losing records right now. In the next 2 games,
Yeah.
you play the Bengals next Monday night,
Yeah,
which is going to be a tough game.
one of them's gonna score 40 on you though. They might have a losing record, but they're gonna score 40. So here's a
Right.
situation where you go, why is the NFL favor? They're like 7-point favorites or something crazy like that, with a worse record or just as bad a record at least. It might be worse. And coming on the road, well, that's because their quarterback's throwing for 400 yards a game and they're dropping 35, 40 points a game, but their defense is giving up more. Well, you think the Cowboys offense is going to outscore Joe Burrow, man? I don't know. I'm getting way ahead of myself on my pick here, but I'm not sure that winning 5 games in a row is really, it may end the very first week, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, and then I mean, what do you do if you sneak in the playoffs to see the Cowboys? I mean, it would be a great story. Don't get me wrong, but you honestly have more problems now because, well, I don't know. I don't want to talk about that right now.
Well,
Let's
yeah, if
if
McCarthy gets this team into the playoffs, he might be coach of the year, and then you can't fire a coach of the year. Come on.
right.
We don't even want to
Yeah,
be
but
there. I don't think the organization wants to be there.
yeah, we're getting way ahead of ourselves. We're still 5-7 with the tough stretch of 5 games coming up. But I promise you guys, I say if the Cowboys go 7-7, we'll start talking playoffs. We'll have a serious conversation about the playoffs. But until then, we're gonna hold our horses. But they are
Yeah.
not mathematically eliminated, so I guess we have to keep answering these questions. So good on them for getting to that point. But yeah, like you said, Cowboy Reg. I mean, this was a game that wasn't necessarily as close as a score. The Cowboys went up 27-10 in the third quarter, kind of took control. The Giants led in this game. You know, they were up 7-3 in the first. And it wasn't until a overshown 23-yard pick six that he tipped to himself, which is an incredible play. That's when the Cowboys took the lead and they led the rest of the way. So that was that big play that you were waiting for them to take the lead. So DeMarvion Overshown, man, just really a budding star in this Cowboys organization. So just awesome stuff. But other than that, you know, the defense showed up and played well. We had a fantastic game. I called it on the last podcast. Rico Dowell will have his first 100-yard rushing
Yep.
game of the year. He had that. Cooper Rush was efficient enough to win the game. He didn't make mistakes, but didn't really do anything amazing. And, you know, the Giants are on their third string quarterback, which Drew Lock, I mean, I didn't think played a terrible game. I don't necessarily think he was the reason they lost. So I don't know if, you know, Tommy DeVito would have won that game. I don't think
I think Drew
that's
Lock's
true
a
at
better
all.
quarterback. He
Yeah.
came in the game like 9-14 as a starter. I mean, the Giants aren't going to play. I don't think they're going to start him again because they're afraid you starting Drew Lock, it might screw up your draft pick because he might mess around and win a couple games for you. The dude doesn't make a lot of mistakes. I mean, you can't call that overshown interception much of a mistake. That's a freak play. And how many people in the NFL can make that play? And we're talking about world-class athletes. That was a crazy play. I'm not even going to put that on Drew Lock. I thought he was decent.
Yeah.
He moved the ball well. He put him in field goal range. They scored 10 points in the fourth quarter. He was still, still driving down the field as much as they could. And they, tried to make a little comeback at the end. Too little, too late. But I don't know if they want to play him, man, because a few more games under his belt. What do you have? 3 days of practice, and he came in and kept a game competitive on the road. So they might not want to put him in too much.
Yeah, I mean, he went 21 for 32, 178, and one interception. He was sacked 6 times, but he also had
Yeah.
4 carries for 57 yards and
he
a
ran the
rushing
ball
touchdown.
well.
So he ran the
Yeah.
ball really well. So, yeah, but overall, man, the Dallas Cowboys defense looks strong. They got some turnovers. He did fumble once too, so he did lose a fumble and had an interception. So he did turn the ball over. But the Cowboys defense, I thought, played a really solid game. They're starting to come back into form again a little bit, even with some injuries. So that's always, really good to see. Eric Kendricks had a good game. Overshown had another fantastic game. Micah had some sacks. Mozzie Smith played well. Chauncey Golston played well again. So, I mean, just really good to see this Cowboys defense come back from being, the worst unit in the NFL to really starting to win the Cowboys some games again. We'll see how that holds up against an offense like Cincinnati. That's going to be a tall task, but they're starting to get some guys back from injury. And like Mike Barca says after the game, he said, "Don't write us off yet." So look like they got something to prove, and he's really leading that defense. It's good to see. What other takeaways you have from this game, Cowboy Reg? I mean, who played well in your eyes? Anyone play bad? Anything like that?
It was nice to see Deron Bland kind of getting back into the speed of the game. He had nine tackles. He had a pass deflection. He hasn't got that interception yet, but I found that he was near the ball when he needed to be, and I kind of spotlighted him for a quarter or so just to kind of seeing what his speed is, and I think he's come around well. Diggs comes back, takes a little pressure off Bland. You're going to start seeing him get jumping routes again. That's my call. But yeah, just the defense is the big takeaway. I mean, the defense with their sacks, the defense with going after the ball, forcing a fumble on Drew Lock, which Overshown came up with, by the way. So he comes out of the pile with the ball, correct me if I'm wrong. And then he also has this pick six. So he is who we thought he is. We knew last year in training camp, even though he was a rookie, we knew he was special. And then he went down with that injury. So we're starting to see him as who we hope that he would be, and he is. Mozzie Smith, like you said, is, again, getting high PFF ratings for his performance, run stopping. Not seeing him in the stat line big time with the tackles, but apparently he's doing his job. So, and then lastly for me, it's Rico, man. Rico, again, not to beat the dead horse, but he is who we've been saying he is all year. We've been saying give the ball to Rico and see what will happen if you give him the ball more than 10 times. They give him the ball 22 times. He goes for 112, 5.1 yards a carry, a touchdown, a 22-yard was his longest, which means that, when you see a guy with 112 and his longest was 80, you go, well, he had one good play. But Rico was just carrying the ball downhill the whole game. So, Rico and the defense are my stars. That's my takeaway. There's some negatives out there, but with this season, wins are hard to come by. So I'm just going to focus on that.
Yeah, 100%. And it's really nice to see that game out of Rico, but also equally frustrating because, I mean, where was this early on in the year? After the first game, the first couple losses, I mean, after 3 games, I think you knew we were calling it right away. I mean, Cowboy Reg especially, and I was right there with them. Like, why is Rico not getting the ball? I mean, what is going on here? We had a game where he only had 5 touches. I can't remember exactly which one that was, but I mean, they were the worst running team in the NFL. This was the first. They had the longest streak in the NFL with not having a rusher with over 100 yards in a game.
26 games.
Oh, you had that stat? Yeah, good job, Cowboy Reg, on the same page. So, yeah, I mean, seriously, that just shows you how bad, and that hasn't happened since the Arizona game last year with Tony Pollard. So, I mean, that's scary, man. We're into December here in 2024. You haven't had a guy rush for 100 years or 100 yards, seems like 100 years ago, since September of last year. So, what the hell is going on in the coaching room there? I don't understand it. I don't think Rico, like, all of a sudden showed up. Like, yes, he's been improving week by week, but that's because he's getting the ball more.
Touches,
so what would this season, could the Cowboys be 6-6 right now if they give Rico the ball more? I mean, certainly I think it's a possibility.
Well, I know for certain there'd be at least one more win because Zeke threw one through the end zone on us one week when he shouldn't even have been in the game. So
yeah, this is the Eagles game. Exactly.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm not not saying we definitely win a game like that, but we were getting ready to go up. If I believe that was early on in the game, it's just like you're done. After that, you're done. So yeah, I mean, Rico, if they give him the ball 20 times, they gave him the ball 22. If they give him the ball 20 times a game, I think good things are going to happen. And when you have a game coming up like Cincinnati, this could be a shootout. Why not give the ball to Rico all day and run some clock and not give Joe Burrow the ball all the time? We were kind of going back and forth, I believe, in our little Cowboys fan group chat. I believe that didn't they come out this game and throw 3 passes right away, first 3 plays of the game, something crazy like that. Yeah, I mean, it's like what is McCarthy doing? But apparently something happened, and he came back and gave the ball to Rico the rest of the game. But I still don't have faith in him doing it again this week. We might be sitting here a week from now saying, why did Rico get 12 carries? Because that's it seems to be the McCarthy way.
Yeah, I mean, that would not be good at all. But yeah, like you said, they did come out and kind of throwing the ball quite a bit in that first series. They did give Rico a couple touches, but it took a little while for him to heat up. But he looks great. And that's good to see going into next year, especially like that he could be the lead guy and we stick with him. I don't know what the Cowboys will do at running back in the draft or look at some other free agents. We definitely know that Zeke, we don't really have anyone else in the pipe coming up, right? Definitely not Zeke, definitely not Dalvin. Malik Davis doesn't play. So I don't know what's going on there, but moving forward, let's hope that Rico Dowdle continues to be on the upward trajectory and continues to be running back 1. And when you have a backup quarterback, like you said, defense plays well. This next game coming up against Cincinnati, where they have such an explosive offense, you're going to need to run the ball and establish a run. That's what's been wrong with this team, and they're finally able to do that. Yes, it's against the Giants, but they don't have the worst defense in the league. They do still have a decent defense. Their problem really comes on the offensive side of the ball. So, But hey, whenever you're able to rush over 100 yards with one guy, that's really promising. So a good game, like you said, the Cowboys get back in the win column. Really, really nice to see. And they are back to 5-7. So at least the team is showing some fight, and it feels good to have that home win finally and get a good win on Thanksgiving. So coming up, the Cowboys do have a tough stretch. They will play next Monday night against the Cincinnati Bengals. Then they go to the Panthers, the Bucks, the Eagles, and Commanders. So, Cowboy Reg, I'm just kind of springing you on this now, but I know we had a long kind of show already because we had Larry on earlier. So I think we would like to do maybe a live show before this Monday night game if we could do that.
Yeah.
To kind of fully preview this game. But just real quick, the Cincinnati Bengals, as of now, are 5-point favorites in this game. They are 4-8 on the year. They've played a really brutal schedule. The offense, like you said, has been going off. Joe Burrow has thrown for over 3,000 yards, 30 touchdowns, and 5 interceptions. And this defense is just atrocious. So they've scored over, is it 38 points 4 times this year?
It's crazy. That's what I'm saying.
They've scored 40, or they scored 38 last week and lost. They 27, 34, 41, 17 against the Eagles, only 21 against the Browns. They won that game, 17 against the Giants, 38 points loss, 33-point loss. So, like I said, I mean, they've been losing track meets basically where the offense can do no wrong, but their defense is non-existent. So if the Cowboys are going to want to win this game, the defense obviously has to show up. They got to keep it low scoring because, I mean, can this offense put up over 40 points? I mean, as bad as the Cincinnati Bengals defense is, I don't see if that can happen. But the Cowboys can absolutely win this game. There's a path to victory in this game, but it's going to be tough. But hey, they were 10-point underdogs to Washington, and we saw what happened against that explosive offense. So we'll see. We'll see if the Cowboys can stop this Cincinnati Bengals team. But any kind of thoughts overall before this game, Cowboy Reg? Like I said, I would really like to do another preview show before that game. But how can the Cowboys upset this Bengals team?
Well, yeah, I just mentioned it earlier. I think we got to run the ball, run the clock when we have the ball in offense. I think we need to finish drives in the red zone. Can't be settling for field goals. If this is a weak defense, which statistically it is, then you shouldn't have to settle for a bunch of field goals. You need to score. But I like to see them, move the ball to some of the tight ends, run the ball more, run clock. And then on defense, I think they're going to score. You're going to have to give up a few and maybe jump some routes. And, it could be a turnover, a pick six or a strip sack, something like that could turn the game in your favor as far as holding serve. If they score, you score, they score, you score, but you score when they have the ball, all of a sudden that's 2 scores, you're up. So that's what it's going to take. It's going to take a turn. It's going to take the defense to score. I'm going to say the defense needs to score at least once for the Cowboys to have a chance of winning this game.
Yeah, that's a great point. And unfortunately, like we said, the Bengals really haven't turned the ball over a ton. Burrow's only thrown 5 interceptions, but it's going to take something like that. And the same thing on offense, you can't really turn the ball over, which the Cowboys have done pretty well taking care of the ball recently, specifically Cooper Rush. So who knows, man? I don't know if seems like the Bengals can't stop anybody, so maybe the Cowboys win a 45-42 game. That would be pretty freaking awesome. I would say both teams have had extremely disappointing years, but there's plenty of talent on both teams still. Joe Burrow's like absolutely unbelievable. If they were 8-4 right now, he would be the favorite for the NFL MVP. But unfortunately, that defense has just destroyed them. So will be really interesting to see. But I think we're gonna, like
Do
you
you
said,
know
do
anything
a full
about
preview of that game.
CD Lamb's situation? Because we've got a nice 11-day break here, but CD came out of that game awfully early and definitely was injured. What are they saying about CD particularly and Trayvon Diggs' status coming into next game? Have you heard anything?
Yeah, so CD re-injured that right AC joint, or not, maybe, I don't want to say re-injured, but that's something that's been bothering him. I would still expect him to play. I think Diggs will be back this week as well. And kind of with that long break, I think I would be surprised if neither one of those guys play.
Zach Martin.
Zach Martin is likely probably doubtful. And I know there's been some rumors about D-Law coming back. I don't expect him to play either. But that's why I would like to do another show
we'll know
so
more.
we can get closer to the actual game day to see what injuries are going to happen and what the status is on those. But there's an opportunity here for the Cowboys to be very healthy on both sides of the ball, with the exception of Dak Prescott. So that would be interesting to see for sure, especially on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, I think this break lines us up well. If we're going to beat a team like Cincinnati, it's going to be after an 11-day break. That tells you everything you know. We were kind of joking about it earlier about are the Cowboys back in the playoff picture? Are they in the mix? If they can win this game, I will then start to have those little glimmers of hope that the season isn't entirely lost. Because I don't want to hear, the haters talking about, well, you beat the Bengals that are 4-8 or whatever. You look at how many points that team scores and the wins or, the losses that they've had, how close they've been and how they've moved the ball. And would you say it was 30 touchdowns and 5 picks or something like that? What'd you say Burrow is?
30 touchdowns and 5 picks.
So if I put that stat line on a team that what are the Chiefs' record now? 11-1, 10-1.
Yeah.
If I
think
say
they're 11-1.
If I say Mahomes has thrown 30 touchdowns and 5 picks and they're 11-1, I'm telling you that he's MVP of the league and nobody else is in the conversation. But the fact that Joe Burrow is on a team that can't win a game, which this is why, stats like that, they're not about wins and losses. They're about how well your quarterback is playing. And you can't put those losses on Joe Burrow when you look at that. 30 touchdowns and 5 picks. That's insane. He's playing MVP level. So I'll be impressed if the Cowboys can beat the Bengals. I really would. I would think that would be out of the, I think the Washington win was impressive. The Giants win was not impressive. You did what you're supposed to do. If they beat the Bengals, then we can have some conversation about the future. But I'll be, we'll get together before that game. But where I'm leaning. I'm definitely leaning towards the Bengals on this one.
Yeah, I think it's a tall uphill battle to climb for the Dallas Cowboys in this game because of how good that Cincinnati offense is, and they got to look at this as their last chance to hold on to any hope at 4-8. Their playoff picture is almost non-existent. I mean, it's worse than ours, which is crazy. So they got to definitely be thinking they want to win this game on a Monday Night Football. So 5-7, 4-8 team, but at the same time, this could be a pretty interesting game. So plenty of people will be watching this one. But yeah, I think our plan will be to get together Monday before that game to give you guys a full breakdown because the show went live today with Larry. So hopefully you all had a fantastic Thanksgiving and saw the Cowboys get another good win and improve to 5-7 on the year. Let's see what the Cowboys can do down the stretch here. It could be interesting. Make sure you go check out that book by Larry, The History of Fantasy Sports. That was fun having him on today. Any parting shots, Cowboy Reg, before we sign off tonight?
No, that was great having Larry on. I learned a lot, and I'm looking forward to reading his book now for sure. But no, that's it from me. Let's rest. I hope the boys are resting and rehabbing, and we get healthy, and we'll have a good conversation Monday about it.
Can't wait. All right. Well, Cowboys Nation, enjoy your week. Enjoy next Sunday of NFL football, and we'll be back on Monday to break down this Cincinnati Bengals and Dallas Cowboys game. So let's see what these Cowboys can do. Playoffs, not dead yet.
Not dead yet.
See you, folks. Y'all have a good night. Later.
Go
Cowboys.
Go Cowboys.